Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Chicago Wilderness Alliance Cafe, the case for art and culture-centered urban green space design. We're going to get started in a minute, but I'm going to let folks have a second or two to join here. So please make yourself comfortable. Good morning, everybody. I'm Laura Riley. I'm the coordinator of Chicago Wilderness Alliance. We're going to get started in a few minutes with our Chicago Wilderness Cafe. We will have a question and answer session at the end, but please feel free to keep yourself muted and your camera can be on or off during the presentation.
I'm not using my computer right now, no. But I still can't hear anything.
We can hear you now, Maria.
Oh, sorry.
No problem. All right. We will continue to let folks in as they join us. But I want to welcome you here today for the case for art and culture-centered urban green space design. We're pleased to have our presenters, Jacob Campbell, the Chicago Region Social Science Manager for the Keller Science Action Center at the Field Museum, Naureen Rana, Senior Project Manager from the Department of Culture and Natural Resources at the Chicago Park District, Mike Dimitroff, the Manager of Art Initiatives and the Department of Culture and Natural Resources at the Chicago Park District, Arlene Turner Crawford, Visual Artist, Curator, Educator, Muralist, and Cultural Activist, Piloto Nieves, Visual Artist, Sculptor, and Art Teacher, Mario Longoni, Lead Environmental Social Scientist at the Keller Science Action Center at the Field Museum, and Dorian Sylvain, Muralist, Educator, Curator, and Public Arts Organizer. I want to take a minute to send a note of appreciation to our sponsors for today's event. We are pleased that because trees are important for equity and also for human health, this cafe is supported by the U.S. Forest Service and the Illinois Department of Natural Resources Urban and Community Forestry Program. This funding supports workshops and training so the Alliance can help more communities improve urban tree canopy forests across the region, including through participation in Tree City USA. Please find more information at the links that I dropped into the chat. And for more information about how to host or to support or find our recordings and past cafes, please see our workshop link as well. We can advance the slide to the next slide. If you'd like to host a cafe, please contact me. And I wanted to give a quick minute to do a land acknowledgement before we get started. The city now named Chicago was home to the Potawatomi people who were forcibly removed from their land. Menominee, Maumee, Ho-Chunk, Kickapoo, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Peoria people also had deep ties to the region. Those of us speaking today acknowledge that we are guests on this land and offer respect to the many Native American people living in Chicago. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jacob Campbell to get us started.
Thanks so much, Laura. And good afternoon, everyone. We're so glad that you're choosing to spend your lunch hour with us. Happy Day of the Dead as well. Serendipitous, as we'll be talking more about this tradition later today. Thanks also to the Chicago Wilderness Alliance for hosting us, and again, particularly to you, Laura, for all the support. My name's Jacob Campbell, and it's really been an honor to be involved with the Roots and Routes Initiative and this Gathering Spaces project since their inception. I've been really fortunate to work with this incredible group of people that you'll be hearing from today. Next slide, please. What you can expect in this cafe, we'll present for about 35 minutes and then open it up for a Q&A for the remainder of our time. So please jot down any questions or comments that come to mind as we go along, and then you can either put them in the chat or come off mute and speak them out loud in the latter portion. So a few framing comments. We'll mostly be speaking about the work that has taken place on Chicago's South Lakefront, specifically in the Burnham Wildlife Corridor, or the BWC, a Chicago Park District natural area. Although we'll be talking a bit also about an extension of this approach in the Beaubien Woods Forest Preserve. The Park District began a major ecological restoration of the BWC roughly 15 years ago, with a focus on developing habitat for migratory birds, such as these in our field guide that you see here, along with other pollinators and native species. In 2013, the Natural Areas team invited us and the Science Action Center at the Field Museum to support the effort, particularly with a focus on engaging nearby communities in the transformation of this park. We agreed, really excited to draw upon decades of social science research and partnership building in those neighborhoods. Next slide, please. And Roots and Routes then was born out of a big tree planting event in 2014, that following year, when 800 volunteers from the Pilsen, Little Village, Bronzeville, and Chinatown communities came to the BWC and planted over 25,000 trees. The success of this day led the partners involved to nurture the relationships that were formed and the roots that went into the soil that day. What our panel will be sharing with you mostly about is a later phase of this work that focused on creating sitting areas in the BWC that we seized upon as an opportunity to also integrate the culture, language, and environmental values of those adjacent communities into this emergent landscape. Next slide, please. And so you'll be hearing a little bit about how that transformation occurred from that earlier slide on Mexican Mother's Day in 2014, when three generations of families of women from the Pilsen Little Village neighborhoods were out there planting trees, to this image, which was a Dia de los Muertos celebration at one of these gathering spaces last year. And so we want to share with you some of the ways in which this work is unfolded, hopefully inspiring you to take similar actions if you're a land manager or an artist, a practitioner of various sorts, in ways in which you might be able to invite artists and other community leaders into emergent ecological and land management processes. And so one other point that I'd like to make, next slide, please. Before I hand it off to Naureen, a thing that has been really crucial for us that has informed the way that we've gone about this work is an attention to the prior connections and relationships to the landscapes that we're working in. And so thanks, Laura, for that land acknowledgement as one way of going about that. And another example that I'd show would speak to about this work was a project that Mario, who you'll be hearing from later, and I worked on with some partners in Bronzeville, the Center for New Horizons, with a group of high school students to do we trained them to do oral histories with elders in the Bronzeville community about their relationships to this exact strip of lakefront, getting a sense for their ties, their relationships to the place, what their values and associations of it were. And so they did incredible work gathering stories from their elders, developed this timeline and a video and booklet that captured the deep ties and love that they had for this place, so that we as practitioners on this parcel of land could be cognizant of that, honor those ties, and bring them forward into the work that we were doing. And so you'll hear about that and have the spirit of that also in the Sankofa example, which Artie and Dorian will speak to. But I wanted to note that as a core element of any kind of work in this effect is sort of these deep layers of history and associations that are in the landscapes we're working in. And so with that, I will turn it over to Naureen to keep us moving.
Great. Thank you, Jacob, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to be diving right into some of the nuts and bolts of our process and how we came about determining a framework for submitting or soliciting project ideas, evaluating them, distributing funds, and actually getting projects moving on the ground. So as Jacob mentioned, we ended up awarding 5 winning project designs to establish 5 gathering spaces throughout the Burnham Wildlife Corridor. That funding came from the Chicago Park District, and as the Field Museum and Chicago Park District were the 2 large institutional partners involved in this area, we didn't feel like something that was truly rooted in community would best be decided solely by us. So we decided to recruit a curatorial committee to help us evaluate proposals and determine what process would work best. This committee was 12 people, mainly from the communities of Pilsen and Little Village and Bronzeville. We also had a few folks that sort of worked citywide, and we pulled from a broad range of skills. So we had artists and art professionals, community-based organizational representatives, just a mixture of people that could help us really objectively evaluate the proposals that were going to come in. Within our own team, within the Field Museum and the Park District, we did have a fair amount of expertise in some of those things, but yeah, we decided a curatorial committee was the way to go. Next slide, please. So this committee helped us establish our process, which was a 3-part process. So we first asked applicants to submit pre-proposals just to make sure that they understood the concept of what we were going after. Then if they were successful, they would be invited for full proposals. And then as a last step, we did in-person interviews, because we recognize that people express themselves in different ways, and that sometimes having an in-person forum where they could bring in models and respond to questions would be a fairer way to evaluate their project ideas. Next slide, please. Really, a central piece of our process was our partnership requirement. And what I mean by that is that applicants were required to be teams of artists and community-based organizations. So we were not simply looking to fulfill art commissions. We wanted these projects to truly be rooted in communities' relationships to art and nature. And so we required, as part of the application, a signed memorandum of understanding for each team. So the artists and the organizations had to sign this, sort of in the spirit of working together, where the artists' designs would reflect community interests, and then the community orgs would be thinking about ways that they could program the space that they hopefully would feel connected to because they had been involved from the beginning. Next slide, please. So, this entire project is a little bit complex. It was the first time that we were going to be putting any sort of permanent or semi-permanent art pieces in our natural areas. Prior to this time, natural areas had been really just, plants and for wildlife and, some trails and things like that. So this was quite a departure for us. And we wanted to make sure that we were conveying how a natural area is distinct from just a regular park, and what its purposes are, and how we were hoping that the artwork that would go in there would reflect the ecology of the area and the spirit of the natural area. We held information sessions in Bronzeville and in Pilsen to have in-person forums where people could ask us questions, where we could explain some of this a little bit more. We could bring those field guides that Jacob mentioned. We could talk about the nature of the place, but then, also talk about cultural connections. We could help artists and community organizations find each other if they weren't already coming into the process with established partnerships. So these turned out to be very valuable opportunities to explore the concept and make sure that we were explaining ourselves and that the submissions that we get would really be responsive to what we were hoping for. So with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague at the Park District, Mike Dimitroff. He is the manager of art initiatives in my same department, Cultural and Natural Resources, and he's going to talk about landowner relations, logistics, and materials.
Thank you, Naureen. Welcome, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm going to have a little perspective from the landowner and artist, which, by the way, we've come to realize is a very dynamic and symbiotic relationship as you get involved with placemaking in various places in the city. The city is your oyster. You've got opportunities everywhere, and there are some micro spaces that are really able to have a large impact if they're done correctly. Just as an aside, the slide on the right is the view of the center of the Catacol gathering space when Naureen and I and Jason Steger first walked the site. Take the long view is my suggestion, and most of ours, because in other words, the long view time-wise, as you're looking at an initiative to develop a relationship and create art that has significance. As the artist, who's the landowner, what's your relationship going to be? How long do you see yourselves in that relationship? And as the landowner, consider those things that allow you to put that first stake in the ground and then maintain that relationship in and around your organization, if it is an organization, or as the landowner. Next slide, please. So if you're thinking about placemaking, and you'll see some images here, some beautiful places that were in the wildlife corridor, you're creating a space that is on land that was been there before. The power is in the land. It's always good to acknowledge land as an entity that's been around for a long time and been used in many different ways, as Jacob alluded to earlier. You're hoping to create a space that has energy and power and become maybe an aesthetic enhancement to the built environment. You have to decide whether that's going to be permanent or temporary, and maybe both. Maybe it starts as temporary and evolves into permanent as the relationship grows. The art or the placemaking or the area that you're creating is going to be hopefully a nodal point of interest and have connectivity to the community, which then generates ownership and gratification and stewardship, both in physicality and in design and in community, endurance. So these are not insignificant projects when you get involved with them, and as they grow like a pebble in the pond with concentric rings. Next slide, please. So as artists, you're really familiar with going from the 2D to the 3D realm in terms of design and process, but many people are not. So it's good to break down the project both in paper form, drawing form, but then have fruitful conversations where you're pushing ideas around. From the landowner, you need to know what the physical parameters are of the space that you've been given. What are the conditions? What's the orientation of the space? What are the physical conditions in the near surroundings? You'll then have conversations about what type of materials that you may be able to use. And then you're thinking about your medium and space relationship and how those will last and be durable over time and be safe, because that's one of your main concerns when you're doing something in the public realm or public-private realm, that you design for safety and integrity. And then you're also embedded in that is a forward-thinking ideas of what programming are going to be able to be used and activated in the space and different engagements. Next slide, please. As an artist, you're always looking for materials, right? And anything you can do to keep costs down is a benefit to you. So on our projects, and that's a good thing to ask of the landowner. Is there an opportunity for studio space or a room to have salon meetings or think tank sessions? Does the landowner have access to materials that may be repurposed? In case of the Burnham Wildlife Quarter, and you'll see images here, we had a working relation with DCASE and one of their storage facilities that had old infrastructure for Chicago bridges and areas in the city that had artifacts that were able to be repurposed. So we took advantage of that. You should have those conversations with the landowner or the person that you're collaborating with. And then you should put ideally a point person on that from your team who's going to oversee those logistics and bring them to fruition, because a lot of times there's a lot of back and forth and communications involved. Next slide, please. And finally, we come to, the nitty gritty. Documentation, which is always sometimes onerous, and sometimes there's a sense of bureaucracy involved with all these processes. But I'll list some things here that you should be concerned about as an artist in the public realm. You've got public liability insurance. What type of permits are involved? Is there an agreement that's going to capture your relationship and spell out the project? Payment schedule. And then you're looking at all of those in terms of the timing of your project. So each of those components takes time to navigate. So again, it's good to maybe select a target point person to sort of facilitate one or two of those. So then timing wise, and I think you'll hear from Artie later, it's good to back time from when your project should be at completion and your celebration, to figure out those components and parse them out so you can figure out how to stay ahead. That's what we call manage the calendar in reverse. Some of these things take time, and if you're working in the realm, your alacrity will increase the more projects you do. Many of you have already been there. So going through insurance and activation with permits is not a problem, but it does have a time space on it, and that's the hard part, is navigating that. So I think I'm going to now turn over to Dorian and Artie, and I'll talk about collaborative project and phase 3. Thank you.
Right. Great. Thank you, Mike. Yes, it is good to be here, and I'm hoping that this information, of course, is very useful for everybody that has joined us today. So I'm going to be speaking from the standpoint of designing and ideation. And I just cannot underscore enough how important this phase is. Many of the things that Mike talked about are really fit into this category of ideation. And number one, it's about what are the questions, what are the boundaries? What are the parameters that you as a designer need to think about? Some people frame that in the idea of what is the question. And so things such as the space, the physicalness of the space, the weather, your budget, we, for example, could only build something that at its max was 10 feet. So you also have to consider those kind of heights and your parameters physically of the space. So I always encourage as much ideation as possible, be it as you see on this slide here in front, from just rough sketches to actually trying to create some actual models with, I use foam core a lot. As you can see in the middle example, I was actually pulling twigs. One of the considerations that we had with our design is that there was a log that had fallen down, and we thought that we wanted to incorporate that fallen log into our overall design. So the idea of actually grabbing some twigs and thinking about that as a potential material is what you see in this slide. Can we go to the next one, please? Right, and so here again, ideation. You see, I'm just continuing to make little models, to think about it spatially. The slide where you see our team out there, one of the things that we needed to do is look at it in scale. Usually when you're doing models or drawings, you're somewhere in a 1/2 inch to, equals a foot scale, or maybe, 1/4 inch is probably even more common. So you're creating these little models and drawings that are quite tiny. And so it's nice to go out and in this photograph, you see us with these rods, really just trying to create what this arch would be and what 10 feet looks like. You can see the fallen log that I referred to. So we wanted to think about this on top of the log, not just in like somebody's backyard. We wanted to be actually in the space. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I also really, particularly when they're community projects, is that you have to create environments in which people can kind of share ideas. And when you are early in a project, I always like to feel that no idea is a bad idea, because sometimes one idea, even if it's a bad one, might lead to a good idea. So, we really want to encourage people just to say what they're thinking. And that goes with community as well as within the team itself. In the early stages, you really are just kind of throwing out everything. Style becomes one of the issues. Research is a very important aspect of designing, and usually within the context of research, sometimes you might land on some aesthetic styles that would enhance the design that you're trying to create. As you move forward, though, the goal is to edit and to simplify things. So there again, when you're creating little models, little prototypes, or even drawings, these are the moments that you really want to try to troubleshoot. I kind of call it the stage of playing devil's advocate, where I question everything. Like, is this big enough? Is this strong enough? Is this connected well? So you really want to think through as many of those kind of moments or conditions or situations as you can, so that if they do arise while you're actually creating your final piece, you've already thought through it. And then let's see, next slide, please. And then the last thing is, again, the testing, the playing devil's advocate, thinking through things, trying new things. Because at the end of your design process, you want to already be thinking about what are the areas that would make improvements, what are the areas that could simplify things. The design part is really the heavy lift, in my opinion, because once you've gone through all of those motions and you've really thought through, you're troubleshooting, you're coming up with solutions, you're editing your work. Then when it comes to actually creating the physical piece, you've already thought so clearly about how to proceed that it oftentimes moves pretty effortlessly. So this again was an early drawing that I had done in the Sankofa project, and a way of just not only thinking through it myself, but also a very important method of communicating with your team members, to actually have a physical model there, to actually have a drawing and say, what do you think about this? How do you like that? So it's really a powerful tool, not only for yourself as a designer, but even to communicate with community or your other team members. Next slide, please. And this is a nice photo of us starting to put it in place. And at this photo, I'm going to hand it off to my co-designer, Arlene Turner Crawford.
Good afternoon, and I'm so happy to be here discussing these important ideas with everybody. I'm going to actually speak to the planning strategies our team kind of put together in terms of how to work together and deal with it. The important thing in collaboration is that it becomes a collaboration, a true collaboration. And a lot of times artists can struggle with collaborating because of our egos. But one of the things I've learned is you need to really be able to submerge your ego when you're working with other artists and do what's best for the whole idea, as opposed to what, you get a fixation on things. So with that, you have to grow some trust with the people you're working with. One of the things I really advise, and we did in our team, was to create once we formed our team, we created clearly identifiable roles for each person to hold. And we had identified a project manager, an artistic manager, and a construction manager. And within that, each of those managers would also have several different responsibilities, one of which would always be that they're an artist. They're an artist within that, but they also had responsibility for various other aspects of the whole project. In most cases, the project manager, for example, the project manager, which I became, was overseeing the timeline, the planning timetables, the record keeping, the logistics, and the budget. I became the liaison between the Park District and the Field Museum. I became a painter and a mosaic artist. The design manager, which is the role that Dorian played, was responsible for the overall design and of the piece that we created, providing technical drawings, plans, design layout. She also became a painter, a mosaic artist, and she supervised the installation team for it. The construction manager, which ended up being Raymond, he was overseeing the building and the structural components of what we put together, helping with community organizing and youth volunteer liaison. He was our IT specialist. He was the painter of kind of the mural on the inside and designer of that. And he also shared installation supervising with the team. These kinds of things are important because it helps you move forward in a more simple way. We, as the manager of the overall project, I basically set up meeting times and overall meeting schedules. And like Mike had pointed to at the beginning, I planned backwards. And that way I was able to identify our deadlines, which kept us kind of on point. We started at, okay, we know that it has to be in the ground at this date because this is when the ceremony will be. So in order for it to be in the ground at this date, we have to have A, B, C done. So we went backwards through the whole construction of our thing, looking at it that way to identify how much time we're going to need to do this, how much time will we need to do that, until we got all the way back to the beginning of the process. So we knew exactly, we established a calendar of dates that we wanted to have major things accomplished and finished. And that helped us plan better to see how we were going to do this work over it ended up being, I guess we started in January. Actually, we started as soon as we got the commission, and then went forward to the end of July when we knew that the ceremony would be. So we had established that calendar. Meetings, within that, we also set up our specific meeting dates where we would definitely be talking to iron out things. You have to set up a clear agenda for all your meetings to identify the task and the reports and the concerns and the questions that everybody is going to have. within identifying tasks and assignments and keeping notes and records, it's really important that you make sure your team is going to follow through, read read minutes, make sure they know when their deadlines, where their tasks come in, and when we're counting on them to have that accomplished or this accomplished. So all along, we keep communications within the team as transparent as possible. After discussions, we review what it is we said we're going to do, and you know, make people sign off on that. We also needed to create timesheets. So, I mean, this is kind of the bare bones of keeping to it. You can move to the next slide. I think I'm kind of we kept timesheets. I created a timesheet for everybody. So anytime they were out on the site doing work, or in their studios doing work, or at the Southside Community Arts Center doing work, we had a specific idea how much time they put into the effort, so that these kinds of things would be what we'd have a record of. Everyone committed to keeping up with and reading all the correspondence. I mean, as the project manager, I had to do the details of being kind of the nag on people and making certain that things happen when they needed to happen. And everybody kind of agreed with that and supported my ideas with that. I also was the liaison for a lot of the business part of it. And you want to have someone you kind of want to find people and put them in their niche, so that those people who are good at doing certain things get to do the certain things they're good at. Dorian had a background in stage production, so she was the ideal person to be our design and artistic artistic director of the project, because we knew that she was going to make it so that it stood the test of time and would withdraw. She understood all the logistics of keeping the weather and the structure strong and safe enough for it to move forward on. Raymond was good in terms of knowing how to organize construction details, as well as deal with the painting for the mural part of it. And it ended up being a wonderful collaboration. And that's how you keep it going. Next slide, I think. Okay, so keep communications within the team as transparent as possible, have everyone agree and commit to keeping up with reading, with all their readings and their correspondence. And that's what makes it happen. Also, as a project manager, I related to and kept correspondence going with the Southside Community Arts Center, who ended up being our community partner in this. And that also became a real successful outcome. They gave us space to work when we were at the point of doing constructions in the mosaics. We had carte blanche in terms of the third floor area to do our mosaic. We had volunteers from the Southside Community Arts Center, the students, as well as other artists come in to help us complete move our project forward. And that made it feel much more, that really brought in a lot of community ownership to what we were doing. And I think that was valuable. Next slide, I think I'm almost done. Yeah, as I said at the beginning, we worked backwards. And that's just an easy way. I found that's the best way to identify your deadlines. And helps you set up what you need to accomplish and when. I think I'm all, and there we are. I will then turn it over to the next person. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Well, my name is Piloto, and I am a co-creator of La Ronda Paracata together with Héctor Duarte and the community. Casa Michoacán was our community organization. Well, I will recommend you to think since the very beginning when you see the artist call, is to think what values would you bring to the community, and also think that the space that you are creating you're building a new member for the community. So what kind of values this new member will bring to it? So as an immigrant and with Hector Duarte, we thought about the butterflies to represent migration, and also we decide on this specific space because it's the only kind of like higher point in Chicago. We don't have mountains, and in Mexico we miss, like, we have a lot of mountains, and here in Chicago we miss that. So we wanted to that specific space just to kind of have this feeling within us. And it's when we started creating these butterflies to create like all immigrants all dancing together. And that's how we started. Then to create a sense of co-creation and a sense of community, we started inviting the community together with Casa Michoacán. You also have to think like the community organization that you're going to invite has the same values. In this case, Casa Michoacán helps immigrants and any immigrant, not only from Mexico. They offer them English classes, computer classes, citizenship classes. And so with that, we have a tight organization that is helping the values to grow with the values of the sculpture. So every person that comes to La Ronda Paracata feels ownership in front of the lake. And since we have community members and public schools that or like just anywhere, like in Little Village, Pilsen, that have never seen the lake, even though they have been living here for a long time, but since they are working or like the children have nobody to take them, we thought about creating this space so people start visiting and feeling ownership of this piece of land. So next slide, please. When we started thinking about Michoacán and the butterflies come back to Michoacán by these days, Day of the Death. So we started inviting other organizations such Northeastern University. They have a community outreach through different schools to continue seeing children from kindergarten all the way to college, and also parents. So we invited them to be part of this celebration. And then we had challenges, for example, buying cempasúchil, the flower for Dia de los Muertos. So we thought about inviting another organization, another university, and we invited to collaborate with UIC greenhouse, so they could help us with planting cempasúchil, so we don't have to be spending money on that, and also for them to have a sense of community with us. And this first gathering that we had it during COVID, and we were doing it remotely. And right now we had like 300 people in a procession marching, crossing the bridge and going to La Ronda Paracata. And the most value that I find is that like some elder women or people that have been here for a long time. For example, myself, I couldn't go to see my mother or my family for like almost 13 years. And here we have elders that came when they were in their 20s or something like that, and now they're like 80 and they cannot go back to their homeland. So having these gatherings have bring them joy and sense of like, if they couldn't go, like the tradition came to them, you know, like we have people that like elders that go with their grandsons and they start crying because they're like, this is what I wanted to transmit to my children, you know, and this is what I have been talking about to them, and now they have to experience it too, with the cempasúchil and the ofrendas and so on, you know, like, and all the people together, and seeing like that death is the equalizer, you know, like, and sometimes we leave our land to for a better life, and we find ourselves trapped, you know, in this land. Can we go to the next one, please? So here it is, Dia de los Muertos. This was we were celebrating the people that have died protecting the trees for the monarch butterflies. And now we were having this gathering this past Saturday with a bigger group. Now every time becomes bigger and bigger, and you can see here the cempasúchils flower that are planted by the expressway near to UIC, and you can see the skyline of Chicago, and it's really moving for the people who comes to cut the flowers. We do a little ceremony cutting the flowers, and we gather there before we cut them. We have a little celebration, a little land acknowledgement, and also a ceremony to start cutting the flowers. And it's very moving because this flower means a lot to us, because the name is comes from Sempuali, which means full count. It means 20. And then Xochitl means flower, so it's the flower of the full count. And we take these flowers, and when we get to La Ronda Paracata, everybody has the opportunity to put flowers wherever they want to decorate it. And so we think about creating these rituals with the community so they feel ownership of the space, and also they become an ambassador of the space. So when they leave, they start speaking to their family members, to their friends about this space that is welcoming and is for them, you know, like, so they can go back to the lake. Can we go to the next, please? And here we have Erika. She's a dancer and a teacher, and a key member of our community to bring the children from different schools. We did we have like 3 different schools and keep growing from little village, back of the yards, Southside Chicago. And the beginning, it was just between the schools. Now we are inviting the community around, and like people start coming more and more. And when after they see what we are doing at La Ronda Paracata, and they feel the energy of the people, they feel, I mean, of like, how can I explain it? Like they feel the same tribe, you know? You have that feeling that we can be from different parts, but we are all here together and celebrating life and celebrating death, you know, like as a way of transformation and as a greater equalizer and the communities. So my advice to you is just to find a community organization that has the same values that you want to project, to be able to invite the people and have a goal all together, so the growth of your project can do it or organically. And every time you have an event, people feels welcome, and they are also feel invited to take care of the space. And I think I will leave you with that. And thank you so much for being here, to everybody who watched this. And you guys have a great day. Thank you.
Mario?
Thank you. This is this is my slide here, so we can start here. So we're coming off of this successful experience of having, collaborative decision making, collaborative design, collaborative construction, collaborative activation, and even collaborative stewardship in the Burnham Wildlife Corridor. So we had to ask ourselves, where do we want to go next? What do we want to do next? So one of those things was to develop the Gathering Space Guide, which I think Jacob can hold up a copy, but it's in some sense the basis of the session we're doing today. And you can give us your name on a form that I know Nicole is sending a link out to receive one of those. And you can also check out the gatheringspaces.org website and download it there. But the other possibility was to go and use it in the other places, to use this approach in the other places we work. So the Field Museum has been a longtime partner of the Forest Preserves of Cook County, and we have a long-standing relationship with Beaubien Woods Forest Preserve, particularly as the site stewards of that preserve. And it's down at around 138th Street and the Bishop Ford Freeway, extending west along the Little Calumet River. And Riverdale's the community area, and some of the neighborhoods are things like Altgeld Gardens and Golden Gates and Pangea Homes. So those are folks also that live along the river in that area as you get past the preserve itself. And so our experience there very much followed a lot of the same lines as at the BWC, but I'll highlight a couple of additional twists on our experience that we learned from there. Certainly Riverdale doesn't have the same public art traditions as Pilsen and Bronzeville. So creating a committee, a curatorial committee, it was harder to do things like find as many artists or artists who had the experience and background on doing installation art to be on the committee. So we actually stepped up the degree to which we expanded the committee to be educators, to include people from civic organizations, and even for some of that technical expertise on public art, we brought in Mike Dimitroff as a non-voting technical advisor to really carry some of the weight of helping the committee think about those parameters. In the end, much like when you hear Piloto talking about the other groups that got pulled in activating the site, this approach actually helped to increase the number of organizations in the area that were ready and able to start activating the site once it was in place. So it worked out to our advantage. Also, you can see in the picture there's a roof and a portico with natural carvings on it. There's painted artwork below. There's recycled materials that were brought from that warehouse Mike talked about that were pieces of older monuments that had been deinstalled. Those things, along with the fact that it's at the starting point of the African American Heritage Water Trail, means that this gathering space was both realized in its design and in its use now as really being able to be a node of multiple themes that have included environmental justice, the Underground Railroad, the Tuskegee Airmen, Black traditions of bicycling in Chicago. The We Keep You Rolling community group has been using it a lot. So that has very much worked to our advantage. One thing worth noting in the forest preserves is, and particularly at Beaubien Woods, is the Native American heritage there. And certainly Beaubien Woods, Beaubien's Native American wife, it was her lineage that were the folks that were even still living in this area when the land eventually then accessioned to the forest preserve and became a preserve. So one thing we've all realized in retrospect is that's the next piece of interpretation and inclusion that we need to do in this space, is to really try to activate the native heritage in some appropriate and collaborative way that the current gathering space does not do explicitly. A couple of just issues to anticipate. You will have creative disagreements. In our case, there was some pulling back and forth around the depiction of Black suffering or Black victimization. And my advice on that is simply to anticipate those things and probably have more of an explicit discussion among your curatorial committee than we managed to, about really how important is it that certain themes get depicted and maybe that others don't. How do you want to build that in? Do you want to really put it into the RFP, or do you want to just have your selection process favor those that depict, say, Black joy? And those are things that, you know, you just want to think through in advance as a way of helping you to then deal with the stuff when it comes up. And then we also had liability and legality issues. I don't know that that portico roof there where you can process into the boat shape with those lovely columns you can see in the picture, I'm not sure that was over 10 feet tall, but the forest preserve certainly had some issues with the safety of that element, the long-term durability of parts of it, and who was going to incur liability both for maintaining repairs and if something went wrong. And so our construction did get pushed back from, it was supposed to be done in the fall. It was pushed back to a spring and an early summer. And I think we would have done better if we had engaged the landowner earlier on really kind of insisting that they look in detail at what they were saying that they were willing to work on with us, and give us the full menu of what their concerns could be, so we could have addressed them early. So I think that captures the gist of that part of the project. I want to just, go ahead, next slide. I just want to acknowledge that, you know, here are the 5 community partners that in the BWC worked with the Park District and the Forest Preserve, and that Roots and Routes as an initiative is really something that is not just the gathering spaces and the events that happens there, it's the network. And as we look at the next 5 years that we want to do with the gathering spaces, there's the opportunity for the same community groups and the same artists to keep collaborating with us. But there's also opportunity for folks to say, hey, we've had enough. Our space is kind of worn out and can't be maintained well, and we need a break. And so then we have other groups we can draw on and potentially do new gathering spaces, new programming, new partnerships. So it's an evolving process over time, and the network is an important part of that. And then with that, I want to turn it back over to Jacob. I don't know if we have time for questions or not, but
Thanks, Mario. And thanks to all of the panelists. We had a lot to share. So in fact, no, we actually don't have much. We did not manage to leave much time for questions. Apologies on that. We may have time for one. And I don't know if Laura, you have some concluding thoughts, but I will urge everyone there with questions, ideas, requests for the guide. This gatheringspaces.org site has an interactive feature. You can send us a note with questions, ideas. If you want to bounce ideas and have consultation and thoughts, we're happy to do that. But is there 1 or 2 burning questions with our last remaining minute or 2? Feel free to come off mute and ask.
Renee?
Hey, thanks for allowing one question. Hopefully it's a good one for everybody. Thank you for all the information. It's related to a potential issue I'm dealing with the project, and I wonder if with the expertise of the presenters here, you might be able to give me some guidance or advice. Do you have any guidance or advice if you're working on a project and the community involvement is a key priority, and at some point during the process, there's a realization or you're directly told that they don't trust the landowner or the organization, maybe because like historical stuff, or maybe because something happened recently, like, just looking for some guidance or advice on your mid-project and you realize that there isn't as much trust or engagement as you initially had planned for.
I'm going to say one sentence, which is quickly that if you can turn their perception of an organization or a landowner into a relationship with a particular individual, that would be a place to start. Can you get some of the key partners that you want from the community to work with you? Will they meet with a representative of the landowner in an effort to build bridges and have a personal relationship rather than a historical one?
Yeah, I would concur with that. And, you know, as the park, we feel like we have, and the field have sort of an egalitarian embrace as landowners. So I think dialogue is key. And Mario says, you know, engage the principals in a direct conversation with those folks who are maybe doubting to figure out how to bridge that gap.
Anyone else? And Laura, please just let us know when we have to stop.
Yeah. You know, I have time if people want one more question. Otherwise, what I wanted to say is that I will be sending out the recording as well as the PDF of the slides to everyone. And I will try to make sure that I get a link to the gatheringspaces.org in that mailing that goes out to everybody. So, oh, Carolyn, if you want to squeeze your questioning, please go right ahead.
My quick question was just about finances. I was curious. I think at one point it said it was funded by the Park District, but I was just curious if there was other grants that were used for all of these projects.
I can just jump in quickly. Oh, sorry, Jacob.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the Field Museum secured a Chicago Community Trust grant that supplemented some of the Park District funds, especially around some of the activations and then the grand opening celebration and some of those things. But Naureen, you have a better handle on this.
I was just going to explain that the initial awards were $20,000 each to the 5 teams. So that was $100,000 total that came from the Chicago Park District's capital budget for the Department of Cultural and Natural Resources that would normally otherwise be used for benches and fencing and things like that. So that is solely what funded the design and fabrication and installation of the gathering spaces. And then from that point forward, we have gotten a number of different grants or funding to support the programming at the spaces.
Yeah, and to Amy's point, we in keeping these spaces activated and alive, we've secured funding from the Walder Foundation, Department for Cultural Affairs with the City of Chicago, and a few other outlets as well. And so there does seem to be a lot of interest from funders in this kind of work right now. We note in the guide that there feels like a moment, historical moment around this type of work and intervention into landscapes and working with communities. And so there are resources available. Happy to provide ideas and brainstorm if you want to contact us directly around some of that.
And just a quick heads up that by the time we got to Bobby and Woods and used the coastal zone money and Walder money, the fabrication budget had gone up to like 45,000. So just it varies a lot.
Turns out 20,000 was probably not enough.
Right. That's what I was going to say is that's what we had. And so that's what we used. But the feedback was that wasn't enough for each one of these spaces because you're paying for people's time and their knowledge and their expertise, as well as the materials and the transportation costs and the installation costs and all of those things.
That's right. So with that, sorry that we didn't leave more time for questions. Please, though, continue this dialogue with us if you're interested via email and through the gatheringspaces.org website. We're excited to hear from you where this may go, and just noting too that there's a featured projects component of that website. It's not meant to be just for Beaubien and the BWC. We want to highlight and create a community of practice there for all of these kinds of work happening around the Chicago region, Chicago Wilderness region. So if you have something that you'd like to feature there, let us know, and we'll promote it that way as well. So thanks again to the panelists, to CW Alliance, and to all of you. Hope you have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
you.